Hey, it's Mazzy, and I'm going to talk to you again about Little Feat. Some of you have said, Mazzy, enough of your Little Feat stories, but I love talking about Little Feat. But today I have Jason Jones from Rhino Records, Senior Director of A&R,
Yep,
which is
correct.
Artists and Repertoire. A
Correct.
beautiful name, right? Those of you who don't know. And we're mainly going to talk about the Rhino reissues he's been working on lately and some other things he does at Rhino.
Yeah.
And obviously, Rhino, like every label, has different divisions and different groups and teams working on different projects. So I'm going to obviously just we're going to discuss what Jason is working on. Rhino is basically the reissue catalog division of Warner Records, and I just want to say thanks for coming,
Oh, you're
Jason.
welcome. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
And when I was growing up, all my, buying records, Warner Brothers was always my favorite label because I always thought it was the hippest and more creative. And all those $2 lost leader two records you could set and away for. I still have every single one in my collection. And a lot
Awesome.
of these groups I got into were uh, Captain Beefheart and the first Sparks record. I remember when they were on Warner Brothers, and
Oh yeah.
obviously Randy Newman and Ry Cooder and all that. So uh, we're going to talk about Little Feat. This is my Little Feat collection, and we're going to talk. I think the nucleus is three records, three projects you've put out that I know about, and then you can kind of go from there. Obviously,
Sure.
most recently, these expanded reissues of their second and third album, Little Feat's
Mhm.
Salem Chews
Yep.
and Little Feat's Dixie
Correct.
Chicken. And prior to that, and I have a vinyl version here, but this amazing set,
Yeah.
the Waiting for Columbus. And I've said many times, to me, they were amongst the best live bands of the 1970s. And I think this is the best live rock and roll record of the 70s. Yes,
Yeah.
along with Allman Brothers, Fillmore, and the band's live album, the
Rock
double
of
album.
Ages.
So Rock of
Yeah.
Ages. So
Now I also worked on the Electric Lycanthrope reissue. So
nice.
that was kind of the opening volley for this kind of reissue campaign. Yeah, that one.
And this was a record store day release from
Correct.
1974.
Yeah, it was Black Friday of 20, 20,
Now,
21.
you seem to be the sort of the go-to Little Feat thing. Every time I read about these Rhino reissues, you're popping up, whether it's the Hoffman forums or
Yeah,
somewhere talking about this. So, were they sort of a pet project, or were you thrown into it? Tell me about your
pet
introduction to Little
project.
Feat.
As soon as I walked in the door here in 2019, one of the very first acts that I raised my hand of, I want to work on this, was Little Feat, because I think that they are one of the most important American bands in existence. They really are an ever evolving and ever changing uh, piece of the patchwork quilt of American music. So, and I think they don't make them like that anymore. You
How do you
know,
describe them musically? If you're telling someone about Little Feat, because there's so many different
yeah,
subgenres of rock and roll, whether it's southern rock and swampy rock and
yeah.
metal, and I mean they're not any of those. So how do you
No,
describe them?
I mean, to me, it is a rad gumbo. It really is. It's a little bit of everything. They really are a part of that certain chemistry of, post Zappa, post Dylan, very surrealist. We can kind of take from everything and create something that is unique. There's very few bands that can touch upon country and funk and ballads, and also very, propulsive. They can rip your face off, they can make you cry, they can make you dance, they can make you swing. you know these are really amazing players. That's the thing that always kind of has stayed with me with regards to them. My entry to Little Feat was actually Lowell's solo record, Thanks I
Ah,
Lead It Here. I picked that up whenever I was like 13. in the early 90s, whenever the whenever the CD reissue happened, which I think was in 1993. I got a cutout version of it. I grew up in Tennessee and at a very small town, and my local record store was Walmart. So exactly. And they had a cutout version of that record. And I really fell in love with that record, and particularly fell in love with the version of Two Trains that was on that record, and 20 Million Things and Himmler's Ring. And I was already enough of a nerd, and also informed enough with punk rock DIY kind of ethos, to where there was no baggage with me listening to the Sex Pistols and then turning around and listening to Lowell George's, surrealist solo album. I just looked at it as freedom. But
you probably had to stay away from prog. If you were into punk, they didn't like prog bands.
Well, no, man, I totally got heavy into Genesis as well. Okay. Early Peter Gabriel Genesis stuff.
There we go. That's you had the right answer there. Early Peter Gabriel.
But really, it was something where that version of Two Trains, I already had All Music Guide. I was already reading it cover to cover. I was already deep in. So I looked up, okay, I knew it was a cover. I knew it was a Little Feat cover. I knew that Lowell was from Little Feat. So I went and sought the back catalog. It was something to where it was still in the early enough days of CD reissue culture that everyone was still trading in their vinyl collections. So I could go and get the core catalog for
a couple bucks.
$10. I remember So it's kind of like, my experience with them is through the development of not just vinyl being still an important and impactful format for people of my generation and of your generation as well, but also growing up alongside reissue culture. I think that really is what kind of like tipped my hat towards that. So whenever, I had the records, I had the CDs eventually, whenever the Hotcakes and Outtakes box came out.
That's a slim CD box, right? Yeah, I love that with the butter pads. It took me a while to figure out which is disc 1, 2. I just didn't think one pad of butter is 1, 2 pads is 2, 3 pads. Yeah. Those of you who have CDs, I don't have that one with me. I didn't bring it. It's hysterical.
Yeah,
it's a great album. It's a great collection.
But that's something to where that really speaks to the surrealist, funny nature of them. Like that's just part and parcel with being a Little Feat fan, I feel like. But anyway, it was something. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just for me, I want to let you speak on that. But what I loved about Rhino, especially, actually, I think they came into, even though they were there before the CD era, they came into a whole independent thing with their amazing, and I would say wacky design things in CD box sets. All their design elements, from Brain in the Box to, the girl groups with the hat box and everything. And that series of, the Randy Newman stuff and Little Feat stuff, and of course Ry Cooder and all that. But they just seem so swampy to me. And I always try to think the lineage, obviously coming from the Mothers a little bit, but also they don't sound anything like Creedence Clearwater, but they were the closest to a swampy American band, except Little Feat didn't have those 3-minute singles. They had great songs that went on, and to me are more of a tighter band all around than Creedence. But
well, and also you can't forget the influence of Kenny and Sam being in Delaney and Bonnie, like that. That's really a part. Like that's its own certain type of gumbo in its own way. And
that
also
blue-eyed soul thing that was happening, like gospel, almost like rock gospel.
Which those bones were already there within Little Feat. I mean, you look at Brides of Jesus on the first record, you look at you look at Willin, you look at Got No Shadow, you look at those, those influences are already there. So for them to be able to step into that band is really, it was an easy transition, I feel like. And I feel like they really did, finally, the chemical mixture of that band was there. Not to say that the first lineup isn't amazing in its own way, because it is. The first record is the debut is one of my favorites. Sailing Shoes obviously is an extremely important record. But yeah, I mean, they were a very important band.
I've had
And the fact
people
that you can still go see them live today is even more special, because these are songs that have been lived in for 50 years, over 50 years, so it's like, if people out here who haven't seen them before, if they're coming to your town, legit go see them.
I just missed them here. They were here in Seattle. I'm in Seattle. They were here in Seattle last month. But I did, when I was 19, I saw them for the first time in San Francisco, 72, in a club in North Beach. And then I saw them in 76 at Winterland, and they were the opening act or the middle act for ELO. So it was, because Bill Graham would always mix up the artists.
Sure.
But they basically blew ELO off the stage. I mean, ELO was just getting huge, where they were big, but they hadn't hit the stadiums yet. Winterland holds about 5,000 people. Let's talk about these two, because I've had people ask me whether it's my Instagram or my video. Well, I have the originals. They'll say, why do I need these? What's the difference and everything? And well, you talk about that. First of all, I don't usually do shootouts. I think the sound is slightly better than the originals in a certain way, but this isn't a video, and I'm not talking about the what do you call it? The cutting and stuff. These are Chris Bellman, right? Cut these.
Those are Bernie. Those are
Bernie Grumman. I'm sorry, Bernie Grumman. Yeah. However, what's great about it is, to me, these are 3 record sets, and it has each one has a disc of outtakes and demos, alternate versions, and a live show from the period, close to the period when this record came out. And I mean, I think they list for about $50 or so. And for 3 records these days, and you can get it cheaper here. I mean, we're talking about, one Steely Dan record for $150. Okay, I digress. So talk about these and how you researched finding the material to add to it, because I know years ago, and I'm sure you know about it. And in fact, if I pull these records out, blink twice if you have a project in the works in the future for other records. But there's what's the there's the Hot Cakes, all the reissue albums, like things like this, the Hoi Polloi.
Hoi Hoi. Oh yeah. Hoi Hoi. I mean, to me, that was, in getting into the band, pre the Hot Cakes box. This was a band that was already kind of anthologizing itself, and also, that's a beautiful proper send off to the Lowell era of that band. It's really, I think that comp is amazing. I think it's very well sequenced. It has a real eye towards the history of that band, and it harkens back to the original Lycanthrope bootleg with the cover art. Like, it's just a perfect little cult band piece. Right. So between that and the Hot Cakes box, and also just the knowledge that Little Feat was a band that both Mo Austin and Lenny Waronker, this was a pet project for them.
And Russ Titleman sort of at the beginning.
Yeah, and Russ Titleman sort of at the beginning. But and also, you've got Ted Templeman working on them. It's just very classic era Warner, where, if Lowell wants to go into the studio to record some stuff, here's the keys, go in. So I knew that there was it's the same thing with Randy Newman. It's the same thing with Van Dyke Parks. It's the same thing with Rycooter. You know, there are just certain artists that, you know, if you live in LA or LA adjacent during that time period, you know, if you want to demo some stuff, go for it. I mean,
if you ever do anything with Rycooter, he's my all-time favorite guitar player. So you're gonna.
I tried.
Yeah,
I tried to do some
I know
stuff.
he's not a big seller. I totally get it. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I tried to do some stuff for Rice catalog. I did.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it just,
I
these
get
things
it.
get, you know, Little Feat was stalled for 2 years. You know, I could have started, if I had been able to hit the ground running with it in 2019, whenever I started at Rhino, you know, I would have already be at, you know, Time Loves a Hero.
Even
now.
the UFO, what is it? The UFO CD on a record store day comp on vinyl or something. But anyway,
Yeah.
I digress.
So it's just, you know, it's just these things sometimes need time and energy and internal support and external support in order to get over the line. So what I will say is that the true genesis for Sailing Shoes Deluxe Edition, because I'll start there first, was the discovery of the demo for the track Sailing Shoes that has Van Dyke Parks on piano and Lowell on guitar, on acoustic guitar and vocal. That was discovered at the end of a random Randy Newman reel.
Wow. Like clipped on, like edited on?
Yeah.
Like,
well, basically it was Randy running through some stuff.
is this a copy tape or a master or
it was just a 2-inch
oh
2-inch tape. So it's like, you know, whenever we're working on certain projects, you know, we usually will running things down, we always try to run it from end to end because you never know what you might find. That was a real eureka moment. And the fact that that existed, that alone justified further research into doing it and pursuing this deluxe edition. So what I did from there was just, you know, we have a library system where we go and we, you know, call up certain file numbers and catalog numbers, things like that, and it'll kind of associate various tapes with certain barcodes and things.
Do you
like
have an
that.
equivalent like Iron Mountain, like where Universal and all your tapes are stored for Warner's?
Yeah, there's multiple locations.
Okay.
Yeah, there's multiple locations. There's one in LA. But it's something to where I asked for all these tapes to be pulled because sometimes, you know, there's things that are listed as, you know, Texas Rose Cafe demo or 3 tracks. And it's just depending upon who is entering the data entry person for that at that time period, whenever it was ingested into the system, it could have good data, could have bad data. You know, I'll get to the bad data portion of it here in a second, but it was something to where I just started pulling tapes and looking and seeing and listening to see what was of worth. You know, I also wanted to truly tell the story about the songs and that band. And I was not afraid to include things that were on the hotcakes and outtakes box, you know, because a song like Doraville to me is very important to Lowell's development as a songwriter. The alternate version of Tripe-Face Boogie has its own certain sauce to it, you know, and looking at the demos that they did for the Doobie Brothers, like all those are part and parcel of the story that I wanted to tell about this band at this specific time period. So in digging deeper, you know, I was able to find an alternate version of Willin'. Okay, where, you know, it's like you keep scratching at it and more comes out. So found alternate version of AA Political Blues. You know, there's a lot there. The more I kept pursuing, the more kept coming at me. So I always had in mind that in a perfect world, I would want this to be a 2 CD set, because I was considerate of the fact that, first of all, that catalog's never really been looked at in a truly archival way before, those individual albums. So I knew that I had, 80 minutes of room. So I look at all of the outtake material, the demo material that I've already kind of culled together, and it's about 30 some odd minutes. I'm like, okay, I need something else. So I started looking
let me
at,
ask you this. Excuse me for
go
interrupting.
for it.
Do you, in terms of that, do you start from the premise from the compact disc first before the vinyl, or a
It
possible vinyl
depends.
version?
It
Okay.
depends. It depends on the artist. It depends on the formats. It depends on the demand, frankly,
Okay.
because whenever we're looking at things like this, it has to be a balance between art and commerce. You want to make
Of
sure
course.
that it's something where you're not getting so big that you're pricing yourself out for the consumer who will actually try to buy the thing. So yeah. For in the case of Little Feat, I always want it to be a 2 CD set where it can be. The Columbus box is different because that was something to where I wanted to do something that was ambitious. Originally, I wanted to do all the shows, but
What
the
does all the
state,
shows mean?
all of the shows that were recorded for Columbus. So you've got
Oh, just okay. So like the
that.
Grateful Dead does, maybe Europe
Yeah,
72,
yeah.
that Rhino, that
I wanted
massive.
it to be, it was going to be something like a 24 CD box. Like it was going to be
Oh,
nuts. But it
that
was going
sounds
to be
like
a
the days of
little,
Rhino handmade. They would have done
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a student of Rhino Handmade. I
And
wanted it
for
to
those
be
that don't know, Rhino Handmade was, I guess, during the 90s, 2000s, maybe. It was a direct marketing, all CDs, projects that you could, limited editions. One
yeah,
of my favorites is the Delaney and Bonnie and Friends
yeah,
square amplifier, whatever it was, tour
yep,
case box.
yep,
And some of them got pared down for consumers later, but a
yeah.
lot of them were direct limited editions because they
Yeah.
knew the market was slender. Great
Well,
series.
it's also something to where you have better margin, you have better profit margin because it's not going to retail. So
Right.
that facilitates you being able to be a bit more adventurous in the repertoire that you touch with a series such as that. That's why you have your Delaney and Bonnies. That's why you have your Stooges Funhouse box. That's why you have, you know, things of that caliber. Anyway, basically what I started looking at, I knew that there were a ton of Little Feat live tapes in the vault. However, there was one in doing research just around Little Feat in general. I was striking out as far as trying to find a live show for Sailing Shoes. I asked one of the people at the vault to pull a tape that was listed as being from 1979, in August of 1979, by Little Feat. It was a live show, to which I knew was not possible because of Lowell's passing a few months earlier. So I didn't know if it was, maybe a tape of the tribute concert at the Forum or something like that. But I saw that Hamburger Midnight was listed. There was very little notation associated with it, but I saw that the song Hamburger Midnight was listed there. To which I was like, this is very peculiar because they had already stopped playing that song later in the later days of Little Feat in the late 70s. And there's no documentation of them playing Hamburger Midnight at the tribute show. So I was like, can you just pull that tape for me and just tell me what that is? Because it says it's from 1979 and that's not adding up. Now, I had run into cases previously where I had asked the vault to look at something and, someone had misconstrued a 9 for a 4, based on someone's handwriting. It just, stuff happens. Human error happens. I asked him to pull the tape, take a picture of the tape box for me, because I want to know what I'm getting into before I start running stuff down, because I don't want to have to spend money when I don't have to, because that'll go against the budget for the project and, just basic economics of P and
That a lot of
Ling
people out there don't
projects.
realize it. There's
Yeah.
economics involved in business.
Yeah, there's economics involved with it. So he sent me he sent me a note. He's like, you won't believe this. He's like, this is not just one reel. This is actually a set of 10 reels that is from a show, a benefit show that was recorded and put on for the World Wildlife Federation in August of 1971, featuring the original lineup of Little Feat. And it was a 16-track, multi-track recording. It is the only multi-track in existence of them performing live.
That's the Palladium?
That's the Palladium show. And I about fell out of my chair. And I said, okay, I want to look at these 2 reels. Ran it down, timed it out. I had about 40-ish minutes left on my space left on my CD for Sailing Shoes. That show is 41 minutes long. So it fit perfectly. And to me, it was something to where, 2 CD editions of certain records, they can get a little sparse. I think about the recent Revolver reissue where they spread everything out across like 5 or 6 CDs and most of them are 30 minutes long. To me, that is you're stretching your consumers' purchasing power as opposed to and justifying a discount and justifying a price point over actually giving the fan value.
I think Sergeant Pepper did it with the EP that works on a vinyl EP, but then they stick it on a separate CD.
Yeah.
So it pisses CD buyers off.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that not only is it the first time that you're getting this record properly reissued in the proper Rhino style, but also the second CD is filled to the brim. Like I wanted it to be an overabundance. I wanted the album, the remastered edition of the album to be, the first course in a very rich meal.
And it's not quantity over quality. I mean,
no,
the show is amazing. As I was saying, I saw them a year later, 72. Slightly different take in a club, and I was barely allowed to go in the club. I think they were serving alcohol. That's underage, but they were so amazing. Then every time I saw them go twice, they were just so tight.
Yeah, and the thing to me that's most interesting about that Palladium show is the fact that they had only toured a little bit. They were still mainly an LA band performing in LA. So there's both a sense of urgency and a sense of hesitation within their performances because they're still in their early days. Granted, they're about to go into the studio to record Sailing Shoes, but it was just so interesting to be able to hear those songs still in their kind of embryonic form. I mean, the version of Teenage Nervous Breakdown that's on the Palladium show could be, a Clash song. Like they're playing so fast and so propulsive. And it really just, it blew my mind. So
now, how does the band react? How does like Payne and when he hears these tapes, which I'm sure he hasn't heard in 50, maybe never.
He didn't even know it was recorded.
Yeah, that's what
He didn't know it was recorded.
Were they board tapes?
No, they had a truck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had a mobile truck. So it
were they
like,
okay.
Yeah, they had a mobile truck. So it was like, and that performance is not just, there's recordings of not just Little Feat. The lineup and actually there's 2 shows. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's 2 shows. There was a matinee show and there was an evening show. We only recorded the matinee show. So the lineup was some unknown like folk songwriter. He's not even listed on the tape box.
Like Tim Buckley or something.
Yeah, like Tim Buckley. But it was like unknown person. They didn't even catch the full set. So I think that he was just on the bill. He wasn't a Warner act. So after that, this Little Feat performance from the Palladium. After that, the SO Trinidad Steel Band. After that is Earth, Wind, and Fire. And after that is Arlo Guthrie. And whenever I found out that Van Dyke Parks was the person who actually put it on, I was like, oh, this completely makes sense, because
Of course, Van Dyke Parks. Yeah.
this kind of like very eclectic lineup, Van Dyke is someone who has, a very unique vision. He's a genius. And it makes sense that he would put these disparate elements together.
And he's a huge part of the whole Warner Brothers, like late 60s and 70s collective, in a way.
He is. Now, there's a rumor that that performance was actually filmed. But because Van Dyke was doing A&R at that time for Warner Brothers, and he was also working with on the film side as well. Like there were promotional films that he made for. There's one for Rycooter. There's rumored to be one for Little Feat, though we can't find any film of it. But there were like little, like 15-minute little docs about the artists of that time period who were signed to Warner's that they would show before, Brewster McCloud, or like, a midnight showing of a certain movie in the early 70s.
Of course.
Or before Easy Rider or something like that, just as a way to kind of, as the counterculture was growing and expanding and evolving, that they wanted, is an easy way to get those acts in front of the people who would be most inclined to buy those records. So anyway, that really solidified what the deluxe edition of Sailing Shoes could be. It really did.
And it seems a bit unusual that you actually did two at once, right?
I did two at once because,
which I love, but
because there's two sides to that. I knew that whomever was going to buy one would likely buy the other.
Okay.
And two, the band they're touring, playing those records on consecutive nights. So I wanted to make sure that they were both out in time for that tour. And it's a bit of creativity and a bit of economics, and also what was achievable and executable. So from there, for the deluxe edition of Sailing Shoes, I took all the material to the band. Bill Payne was extremely important and extremely overjoyed with the stuff that I found, and particularly the Palladium show. And also the realization that, he's one of the only people still around who
last man standing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's like one of the most beautiful things about working on this catalog is to facilitate, continued development of that band. The fact that these two reissues sparked the idea for their tour that they're doing this fall. I want to make sure that this band's legacy is defined and enhanced and furthered. I'm doing this out of not just love and appreciation for this band, but also for discovery purposes, because I think that there's a lot of people out there who know of the band, but may not have heard the band. And also a lot of younger fans who only, know certain songs. And I feel like a 3 LP set or a 2 CD set is approachable enough for not just the diehard, but also for a novice fan. If you want to take the plunge, here's the deepest dive that you can go into.
Well, I let's move on a little bit from these in a second, but I those who watch me regularly know I beat a dead horse when I'm into a certain band or certain record or certain music, and I do this series. It's the music stupid, going back to the Clinton campaign. It's the music stupid. We don't care about anything else. It comes
Yeah.
down to the music. And this is great friggin' music. And I love
Yeah.
this stuff. Now, obviously, we know that they're not, Van Halen sales or Fleetwood Mac sales or
Yeah.
that type of thing. And of course, I love all these. And,
Sure.
to me, as I said, those of you out there too, aside from those, the Waiting for Columbus is possibly, if not the best, in the top 5 or 10 best live rock albums of the 1970s. And yes, like a lot of I assume there are overdubs and a few cheats and things back in the day,
Oh
like
yeah,
Europe
there's a whole like 3 or 4 days in the studio of Lowell tightening
Yeah,
things up,
and
and
but
yeah,
that doesn't make it less important. Europe 72, if the Grateful Dead finally are in tune for a change, you could joke about that, but it makes it for a great live album.
sure.
It's a part of it. Look at Zappa. That's a whole different thing. Now,
Well,
I
and
know,
yeah, and going back to the live portion of it all, the genesis for the Dixie Chicken reissue was the live show, the Ice Pick
yeah,
El Dorado, that show at Paul's Mall, which had been bootlegged before. However, what we had was the pre-broadcast tape that was in the vault. It was not the mixed down 2-track stereo version. It was a 4-track tape that was sent to Warner back in the day from the radio station that recorded it, because technically Warner controls all of the live recordings, the professional live recordings of that band, from the time period that they were signed to the label. It's a natural
totally.
aspect of recording contracts. So, but whenever I found that and comped it to, my bootleg version that I had, I was like, okay, there's room for some sonic improvement here. It's still rough and tumble. It's still a very hot sounding recording, but the proof is on the tape. It's 7 tracks. It's tight. It's a perfect depiction of them in the early days of the iteration of that band. So from there, it was kind of like the opposite experience of putting together Sailing Shoes. I had the live material. Then I had to go and look for, okay, what alternates are there? What other demo material can I get my hands on? The band had put out the Hot Tomatoes compilation on their own record label in the early 2000s.
Right.
I knew that the Fat Man in the Bathtub demo was on there. So that's a piece that we licensed from the band for the Dixie Chicken reissue. But it was something to where, okay, now I can kind of put the pieces into place. And again, I wanted it to be a chunky second disc that's kind of filled as much as possible. There's one, if I could do it over again, I'm still very, very happy, overjoyed with the Dixie Chicken reissue, and very, very happy and overjoyed with the Sailing Shoes reissue. If I could change one thing about the Dixie Chicken, would be the full unedited take of Fat Man in the Bathtub. That's
So
what
maybe
I
that's
would,
a special single at some point.
yeah, maybe
We
one
could
day.
go on and on. At some point, I'd like to talk to you, not in this video, not today, about all these other projects you do. But Little Feat is so expansive in this. I don't think we're gonna have time for that. But I want to continue with Little Feat because
Sure.
hopefully, like dreamers like me, and hopefully they'll continue. I do want to say one shout out because you can't talk about Little Feat without mentioning Neon Parks, who
Oh
did
yes.
all these great the cover art for everything
Yeah.
except their first photographic
Yeah.
album, which
Yeah.
is, I think it's Susan Titleman,
It is a
wife
Susan
of Russ
Titleman.
Titleman. I'm
Yep.
the wife of Ry Cooder,
Yep.
sister of, yeah, that type of thing. So again, this is the Blink section. There's a lot of things you could go with in the future if you decide to do more. And I don't know if you can drop any hints here or anything. And I
I
do
mean,
want to,
yeah, yeah.
I do have a comment because I follow you and I've read things in the Hoffman forums. I know there's a little switch out. People are saying, "Oh, don't do it as a record store day because we don't get it." But I totally understand how certain artists who are marginal only in terms of the commercial thing. That's all I'll say. That you can sell you can sell out of your allotment doing record store day. And I know some people around the world, it's not always fair in situations, but if you don't do it on record store day, and I'm not, someone's going to say, oh, Mazzy's in defense of these companies doing this. But I will say, you could put this out, for instance. Let's say this was something, or
Yep.
any of these. You could put it out on like you do right now on Amazon, at Rhino, everywhere else, and it could sit there for 3 years, and
Hmm.
people aren't kicked in the butt to go out and buy it. In
Yep.
record store day, you feel, yeah, there's FOMO, fear of missing out,
Sure.
but I find you can always find most things if it's pressed a decent amount at a reasonable price. So,
Yeah.
any
Well,
things you can
well, I
talk
will
about?
say
Sure.
that record store day presents a lane. It presents a certain lane for certain projects to get greenlit. Think to my opening volley in this campaign was the Electric Lycanthrope 2LP. That was a Black Friday title. I wanted to prove that there was demand. Now, granted, it is record store day, but I wanted the commercial and consumer consensus to be that was the dark horse winner of that Black Friday day, which it
2021, 2 years ago. Yeah.
was.
What
So
kind of press run can you say, or can you share that, or do you want? I'm sure it was
that
promoted.
well, it was weird because we were still dealing with holdover of pandemic COVID
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So actually, it was something to where it got split up. It was Black Friday for US only because Europe couldn't manufacture it in enough time. So they held on to it, and I think it came out in like June or July of the following year
In UK,
in the
Europe.
UK, in rest of world. So, I think I have to thank a place like Record Store Day and an avenue and a lane like Record Store Day because it helped facilitate the work that I'm able to do with the Columbus box, with the Dixie Chicken and Sail and Shoes reissues. I will say I have the entire catalog mapped out. I know what I want to do. I've done the research. In most cases, I've already got the tape transfers done. It's just a matter of gauging performance and interest. If it's something, the Columbus box did very well because the band was on tour for a very long time supporting it. So Columbus was everywhere. With Sail and Shoes and Dixie Chicken, so far sales have been pretty good. But it's also something to where the real moment around those records has not happened yet because they haven't done the tour where they're playing Sail and Shoes and Dixie Chicken. So I understand that, there's a certain level of patience that has to take place. If I'm able to continue, yes, Feast Don't Fail Me Now will happen. Last record album will happen. I was going through and so on and so on. I was going through tapes associated with Down on the Farm about 2 weeks ago. Just in my continued pursuit and development of this larger kind of archival work around the band. So, I do want it to continue.
So Black Friday is a little over 3 months away. You must have your order in at some pressing plant for Black Friday.
Oh yeah, I mean all Black Friday titles, which I can't comment on what they are.
No, blink
Like
3 times if I'm holding anything in my hand.
You're not.
I tried. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not Barbara Walters.
But it's I do want it to continue, and people out there who are watching this, if you're even the least bit interested, or if this has piqued your interest,
buy
those, or go check them out on DSPs. Stream them, listen to them. If you get the bug, go buy it. I just want to facilitate as much discovery around this catalog as possible. And it's the same thing I do for all of the other catalogs that I work on. here at Rhino. So
These are really crankable records, and these are among. When I'm home alone here, I'd love to turn my stereo up in the main room here and just blast these things. And they're good because, as I've said on my channel, they're soulful, they're funky, they're southern, they're like you say, the perfect words you've used several times today are gumbo and hot sauce. And
Yeah.
it's exactly that type of music. You know, it's got that New Orleans vibe via Los Angeles. It's kind of like Randy Newman spent summers in New Orleans. You would never believe in a million years that Randy Newman and Ry Cooder are from like LA and Santa Monica.
Oh, totally. And it's, you know, for me, it's something to where it's, you know, it's barbecue weather, you know, throw on the barbecue, crank it up, you know. But yeah, but no, I do, I cannot stress enough, if these do well, like really, like some of the most impactful work is for some of the records that are to come.
Okay, I can't wait. I can't wait. Well, I want to thank you. We're going to end this now. Put your comments in and check these records out. You know, those who know me know I have a passion for this music. I'm not just a shill for whether it's Jason or Rhino or anybody else. When I love a band, I'm not going to do these unless I love a band. There is one request I have that I don't even know if it's an audio recording, but you can see the video on YouTube. One of my favorite off-kilter things is Randy Newman, Ry Cooder, Linda Ronstadt at Odeon, you know, the New York restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to see that on an audio record store day vinyl because that's sort of offbeat. But Linda Ronstadt, who's not doing anything now, Randy Newman, Ry Cooder. If you ever seen that video, I suggest people to find that. Odeon's this restaurant in Manhattan. It's been around since the 1980s, and they did a little intimate thing with Randy on piano. At one point, Linda's sitting on the bench with him, and Ry Cooder plays on a stool, a couple of guitar bits, and it's very intimate. And I'd love to have a record of that. So, that's my request, Jason.
One day, maybe.
Okay. Well, thanks again. I'm going to end this now. And Mazzy loves you, and thanks, Jason, for visiting. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.